There comes a moment in life when the weight you've been carrying becomes too heavy to ignore. You can feel it in your chest when you wake up, in the way your shoulders slump when you walk, in the silence you keep when you should be speaking. You tell yourself you're fine, but deep down you know you're not. This isn't weakness, it's a sign. A sign that it's time for guided healing. A sign that it's time to rebuild yourself from the inside out. Not by pretending the pain isn't there, but by walking straight into it with courage. Today, I'm going to walk you through a journey to reclaim your emotional health and set your life back on a path of recovery, strength, and purpose. When you begin to understand that healing is not something that simply happens to you by accident, you start to reclaim authority over your own life. People often imagine that time is this magical balm that, if given enough days and nights, will erase the wounds and smooth over the jagged edges of memory. But that is a comforting illusion. Time is indifferent. It moves forward whether you are building or decaying. What changes you is not the ticking of the clock, but the deliberate choices you make within each passing moment. Healing requires a decision, and that decision is not made once. It is made over and over again, sometimes every hour of every day. It's deciding that, though the pain is real, though the betrayal cut deeply, you are not going to allow it to define the entire narrative of your existence. And that decision feels risky because it means facing the very thing you've tried to push into the dark corners of your mind. But avoidance is a form of surrender. It hands the steering wheel of your life to the very forces that hurt you in the first place. To choose healing is to say, I will no longer live at the mercy of this wound. And that means standing in front of the truth without flinching, however much it burns, and then building something solid out of the rubble. You may think you are too tired, too broken, too defeated to make such a choice. But those thoughts themselves are part of the wound. They are the echo of pain convincing you it has the final word. Healing begins when you call that bluff, when you decide, no matter how small the first step may be, that you are willing to move forward. But as soon as you make that decision, another trap appears, the endless bargaining with the past. This is where many people lose months, even years of their lives, replaying the same mental film reels of what happened, imagining conversations that never took place, and rewriting history in 1,000 hypothetical ways. If only I had said this. If only they had done that. If only I had seen it coming. That internal bargaining feels, in the moment, like you're doing something, like you're problem solving, but in truth it is a form of paralysis. You're trying to negotiate with a reality that is already set in stone. The past cannot be persuaded. It cannot be edited. It cannot be coaxed into becoming more palatable. And the more you bargain with it, the more it solidifies its hold on you, because you are feeding it your most precious resource, your attention. Your attention is the currency of your life. Wherever it goes, your energy and identity follow. If your attention is locked on the doorway you've already walked through, you can't possibly see the one that's opening ahead of you. This is why people stay stuck for decades. They are still trying to extract a sense of fairness from an event that was, by its very nature, unfair. Healing demands that you stop trying to renegotiate terms with the unchangeable. It's a brutal realization, because it means you have to lay down the hope of ever receiving the apology, the justice, the clarity you believe you deserve. But it's also a liberating one, because the moment you accept that the past will not change, you reclaim the power to change yourself. When you stop bargaining, you stop bleeding energy into a void. You create space in your mind and heart to invest in what is actually possible, reshaping your present, fortifying your spirit, and preparing yourself for the life you still have ahead. It's not an easy shift because the mind resists closure. It wants to keep the account open, just in case some cosmic justice shows up. But if you keep the account open, you keep paying the emotional debt. And the interest rate is devastating. Every hour you spend bargaining with the past is an hour stolen from building a future that could be better, richer, and more meaningful than anything you've lost. The real question is, are you willing to let the past win twice? Once when it happened, and again every day you choose to live in it. Because every time you revisit that moment, trying to trade your present for a better past, you're making the same choice. It's just dressed differently. Healing, then, becomes an act of refusing to pay that price anymore. It's pulling your attention out of the wreckage and planting it firmly in the soil of the present moment, where growth can actually occur. It's here that the first decision, the choice to heal, and the second step, letting go of bargaining, merge into something powerful. One without the other won't work. You can decide to heal but still be shackled to the what-ifs and if-onlys. Or you can stop bargaining but never truly commit to doing the work of recovery. The strength comes from marrying both, the conscious, repeated decision to heal and the ruthless discipline to stop feeding the past what it craves most, your attention, your hope, your life force. And this combination is not something you master in a single moment of insight. It is a daily practice, an ongoing battle between the part of you that clings to what's gone and the part of you that's fighting for what's ahead. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You will slip. You will wake up some mornings and find yourself back in that mental courtroom, cross-examining the past, trying to convince it to change its verdict. You will replay those scenes again. That's not failure. It's the mind trying to protect you by solving a problem it doesn't yet understand is unsolvable. The key is to notice when it's happening and choose again. That is the work. That is the practice. That is the essence of guided healing. The willingness to bring your attention back, over and over, to where your life is actually unfolding. Here, now, in this moment where you have the power to shape something new. One of the most difficult and necessary parts of healing is digging beneath the surface of the pain to find its real source. People tend to assume that the wound itself is what hurts the most, the betrayal, the loss, the sudden collapse of something you thought would last. But when you examine it closely, you start to see that the deepest sting often comes from what that moment taught you to believe about yourself. Something happens, and almost instantly, without even being aware of it, you attach meaning to it. You tell yourself, this happened because I'm not good enough. Or, this means I can't trust anyone. Or maybe, this proves that I'm destined to be alone. Those conclusions feel like truth because they emerge in the raw heat of pain. And pain has a way of disguising its interpretations as reality. But they are not truth. They are stories you have told yourself, stories that keep you locked inside a cage with no door. If you don't identify these false meanings, they will govern you for years without your conscious awareness. You'll find yourself avoiding opportunities, sabotaging relationships, or numbing yourself. Not because the original wound is still open, but because the belief it planted has become the lens through which you see the world. And the tragedy is that you might never realize that lens is warped. You might think you're simply being cautious or realistic or mature, when in fact you're living inside the walls of an interpretation that was built in the fog of hurt. So the work is to separate what happened from what you told yourself about what happened. You can't change the fact that you were betrayed, or abandoned, or disappointed. But you can change the meaning you've assigned to it. You can look at it and say, this was a reflection of their character, not my worth. This was about the situation, not a prophecy over my life. And that shift changes everything. Because the moment you reclaim the authority to define what the event means, you reclaim the authority over the path your life will take from here. But even once you've pulled out the roots of those false beliefs, there's still another barrier that stands between you and freedom. The inability or unwillingness to forgive. Forgiveness is a word that makes many people recoil because it is so often misunderstood. People hear forgive and think it means to excuse, to approve, to pretend it didn't matter. They fear that forgiving will somehow erase the wrong that was done or release the other person from accountability. But forgiveness has nothing to do with declaring what happened as acceptable. It has everything to do with deciding you will not let what happened continue to poison you. It is not for them, it is for you. Carrying resentment feels justified at first. It feels like armor. You tell yourself that staying angry keeps you safe, that it protects you from being hurt again. But resentment is not armor. It's a toxin, and you are the one drinking it. It doesn't protect you. It corrodes you from the inside out. It's like keeping the wound open on purpose, hoping that the sight of your pain will force the offender to feel remorse. But most of the time, they aren't looking. They aren't thinking about you. You're the one left holding the bitterness, and the longer you hold it, the heavier it becomes. Forgiveness, then, is the act of cutting the rope that keeps you tied to the person or event that wounded you. It's saying, I will not spend the rest of my life in reaction to this moment. And that choice doesn't mean the past suddenly stops mattering. It means it stops controlling the present. When you forgive, you reclaim energy that has been trapped in the loop of anger, disappointment, and revenge fantasies. That energy can now be redirected toward rebuilding your life, toward things that actually matter, toward relationships and goals that bring meaning instead of misery. It's important to understand that forgiveness is rarely a single dramatic moment. It is more often a process, repeated again and again, especially when the wound is deep. You might think you've forgiven, and then months later, the resentment comes back in a wave. That doesn't mean you've failed, it means you're human. The mind likes to revisit injustice because it feels unfinished. But each time you choose to forgive again, you're reinforcing a new pattern, a pattern of refusing to live as a hostage to the past. Forgiveness is also an act of self-respect. It's a way of saying, I value my peace more than I value holding on to this anger. And self-respect is essential to healing, because without it, you will always be at the mercy of how others treat you. When you forgive, you stop letting your identity be defined by the worst thing someone did to you. You stop making them the central figure in your story. You start making yourself the main character again. When you combine the identification of the true source of your pain with the act of forgiveness, something profound happens. You begin to dismantle the prison from both sides. Finding the false beliefs removes the bars from the inside. Forgiveness removes the lock from the outside. And suddenly, there's space to breathe. There's space to think about what you want your life to be, not in the shadow of the wound, but in the light of the possibility that remains. It's not an instant transformation. You'll still have days where the old beliefs whisper to you, where the resentment tries to climb back into your chest. But with each act of identifying the lie and choosing to forgive, you weaken their hold. Over time, the grip loosens. And with that loosening comes the freedom to move forward, not as someone defined by what was taken from them, but as someone defined by what they've chosen to build in its place. One of the most insidious habits people develop in the aftermath of deep hurt is the tendency to punish themselves for still feeling it. You hear this in the way they talk. I should be over this by now. What's wrong with me that I'm still thinking about it? Other people have been through worse and they've moved on. Why can't I? These aren't neutral observations, they're accusations. And with each one, they drive the knife in a little deeper. The original wound was inflicted by someone or something outside of them, but this new one is self-inflicted, and it's often sharper. It's as though they've taken the role of their own critic, sitting in judgment over their pain, demanding that it conform to some imagined timetable for recovery. But emotional healing doesn't work like that. You cannot scold a wound into closing. You cannot shame a broken bone into knitting itself together faster. Pain requires care, and care is not the same thing as indulgence. It's the recognition that you are a human being, not a machine, and that the forces which have hurt you have left an imprint that needs tending. Self-compassion is not weakness. It is not the abandonment of responsibility. It's the discipline of treating yourself with the same respect you would offer to someone you loved. Think about it. If a friend came to you, crushed under the weight of loss or betrayal, would you tell them to get over it already? Would you measure their worth by the speed of their recovery? Of course not. You would offer understanding, patience, encouragement. You would remind them that their pain is valid, that healing takes time, that they are allowed to rest. Yet, when it comes to ourselves, we withdraw that same generosity, replacing it with impatience and contempt. This internal cruelty is often disguised as toughness. I'm just being hard on myself so I get better. But toughness without compassion isn't strength, it's brutality. And brutality turns the process of healing into a battlefield where you are both the wounded and the attacker. Replacing self-punishment with self-compassion doesn't mean wallowing in your pain. It means recognizing that the voice in your head that demands perfection and speed is not helping you. it's keeping you trapped. When you replace "I'm broken" with "I'm healing," you give yourself permission to be in process. And when you stop measuring your progress by someone else's timeline, you can actually begin to notice the small victories, the days when the weight feels slightly lighter, the moments when you laugh unexpectedly, the hours when the memory no longer stings quite as sharply. These are signs that the wound is knitting itself back together, not because you bullied it into submission, but because you gave it the conditions it needed to mend. The environment you create around yourself plays a profound role in whether that healing continues or stalls. People underestimate just how much the spaces they inhabit shape their emotional state. Every environment you spend time in is either watering the seeds of your recovery or leaching the life out of them. This isn't just about physical spaces, though those matter. Dark, cluttered, chaotic rooms tend to mirror and reinforce internal chaos. It's also about the people you allow close to you, the conversations you participate in, the content you consume. If you are trying to recover from deep emotional pain while surrounding yourself with people who constantly remind you of it, you're fighting an uphill battle. If your daily life is saturated with voices that feed your insecurity, your bitterness, or your hopelessness, it will take an almost superhuman effort to counteract that influence. Your nervous system is constantly absorbing cues from your surroundings. If those cues signal danger, disrespect, or disconnection, your mind stays in survival mode, and survival mode is not the same as healing mode. You may think you're just enduring it, pushing through, proving you're strong enough to be unaffected. But no one is unaffected. Just as a plant cannot thrive without light, water, and healthy soil, you cannot truly recover in an environment that continually reopens the wound. You have to be deliberate about this. You have to ask yourself, does this space, this person, this activity make me feel more whole or more fractured? More alive or more depleted? Sometimes the answer will require difficult decisions. It may mean spending less time with people who have been central to your life because their presence now hinders your growth. It may mean letting go of habits you've clung to for comfort, but that ultimately keep you stuck. It may mean seeking out entirely new spaces, ones where you are seen not as the version of yourself that was hurt, but as the person you are becoming. That could be a quiet corner of a library, a walking path in the park, a support group where people are committed to growth rather than mutual stagnation. Choosing restorative environments is not about running away from difficulty. It's about recognizing that you cannot do the hard work of rebuilding while standing in the middle of the wreckage. You have to create a space, internally and externally, where you can breathe, think, and act without constant interference from the forces that broke you down. And when you do, you'll find that the work of healing, though still hard, becomes possible in a way it never was before. You'll have the strength to confront the pain instead of merely enduring it, because you're no longer being drained faster than you can replenish yourself. Self-compassion and a restorative environment are not luxuries. They are necessities. Without self-compassion, you become your own saboteur. Without a restorative environment, you are constantly climbing uphill with a boulder on your back. But when you combine them, when you speak to yourself with patience and surround yourself with spaces that reinforce your worth, you give yourself the best possible conditions to recover. And those conditions don't just heal the wound. They also prepare you for the next challenge, because you've built a foundation where kindness toward yourself and wisdom in your surroundings are no longer occasional acts. They've become the way you live. One of the mistakes people make when they're in the middle of emotional pain is believing that distraction is the same as healing. They fill their calendars, bury themselves in work, take up hobbies, surround themselves with noise. Not because they're building something meaningful, but because they're trying to outrun the silence. And in the silence, the truth lives. Distraction can be useful for moments when the weight feels unbearable, but as a long-term strategy, it's poison. It doesn't address the wound. It hides it under layers of activity until you can almost convince yourself it's gone. But it's not gone, it's waiting. And when the distractions stop, even for a moment, it comes rushing back with the same force, sometimes stronger. You can spend years doing this. Years in which the external trappings of your life look full, but inside, nothing has changed. Healing demands something different. It demands that you anchor yourself not in avoidance, but in meaning. And meaning is not the same as comfort. It's not always pleasant. In fact, it's often demanding, even painful. But meaning transforms suffering in a way distraction never can. When you have meaning, you're not just enduring the pain, you're using it. You're integrating it into the structure of your life in a way that builds rather than destroys. Meaning comes from aligning yourself with something larger than your immediate comfort. Helping others, creating something of value, developing skills, deepening your relationships, contributing to a cause you believe in. These are the kinds of things that give your pain a place to go, that give it purpose. Without meaning, the mind keeps circling back to the wound because it has nowhere else to land. With meaning, you have a destination. The suffering becomes a resource, a teacher, a source of depth and resilience that can be drawn on in service of something that matters. This doesn't make the pain pleasant, but it makes it bearable because it's not pointless. And if you think about it, most of what makes pain intolerable is not the pain itself. It's the sense that it has no purpose, no end, no redeeming quality. Meaning strips that hopelessness away. It says, this hurts, yes, but this is also building something in you that could not have been built any other way. But meaning alone is not enough if it stays abstract. You can't build your life on ideas alone. You need structure, and structure is built one small, unshakable step at a time. Too often, people wait for a dramatic turning point, a single decision that will flip their life from broken to whole. That moment rarely comes. The real change is quiet, incremental, almost invisible when it's happening. It's the choice to get out of bed when you'd rather disappear into sleep. It's showing up to work with integrity even when your heart feels like it's in pieces. It's speaking a truth you would have swallowed in the past, setting a boundary you would have ignored, extending kindness when bitterness would be easier. These actions might seem small, but they are not insignificant. They are the bricks that form the foundation of a rebuilt life. The problem is that people often dismiss these steps because they don't feel monumental. They think, what's the point of doing this little thing? It won't change the big picture. But that's exactly how the big picture changes. By stacking one small victory on top of another until you look back and realize the landscape of your life is unrecognizable from where you started. Every time you make one of these small choices, you're proving to yourself that you're capable of more than your pain says you are. You're slowly, quietly dismantling the identity that was built around the wound and replacing it with an identity built around resilience, responsibility, and purpose. And this is where meaning and small steps intersect. The meaning you choose provides the direction. The steps you take provide the movement. Without meaning, the steps feel hollow. Without the steps, the meaning remains a fantasy. You need both. And when you commit to both, something remarkable happens. You stop waiting for the day when you feel ready to live again, and you start living right now, even if you're still limping. You stop defining yourself by the distance left to go and start defining yourself by the direction you're moving. This doesn't mean the road will be smooth. Some days, the steps will be so small they'll feel pointless. Some days, the meaning will feel distant or abstract. That's normal. You're not aiming for perfection. You're aiming for persistence. The goal is to keep moving in the direction of life, even when it's uphill, even when it's slow, even when you can't yet see the summit. The discipline of doing that, of showing up for your life in small, steady ways, creates a momentum that, over time, becomes almost unstoppable. You may not notice it at first, but others will. They'll see the light coming back into your eyes, the way your shoulders straighten, the quiet confidence in your voice. And then one day, without even realizing it, you'll look back and see how far you've come. Not because you waited for a miracle, but because you built one yourself, brick by brick. Anchoring yourself in meaning and committing to small, unshakable steps is not glamorous work. It doesn't get applause. It doesn't happen in a single inspiring moment that you can capture and point to as the day your life changed. But that's why it works, because it's real, because it's sustainable, because it's built on action rather than fantasy. And the truth is, that's the only kind of healing that lasts. You can distract yourself forever, but it won't free you. You can dream of meaning without acting on it, but it won't move you forward. To recover, to truly recover, you must choose something worth living for and then walk toward it, step after step, until one day you realize the pain is no longer the loudest voice in your life. It's just one note in the larger song you're now able to hear. Healing isn't a luxury. It's the foundation for everything else you want in life. And it's not reserved for the lucky. It's available to anyone willing to step into the work. So now, I want to hear from you. Which of these steps do you feel you need most right now? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your words might be the exact thing someone else needs to hear today. If this message resonated with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who's ready to begin their own healing, and subscribe so you never miss another conversation that could change your life. And tell me, what topics should we dive into next? Your voice will shape this journey, and together, we'll keep building a space for strength, recovery, and transformation.